The Mosquito is it's a very unique design, not just because you know, it was the only real twin-engine Merlin-powered aeroplane that was used during the Second World War, but because of the way it's constructed. So the de Havilland company had built some aeroplanes using this laminated plywood sandwich construction prior to World War II, and while everybody else was being told that the future was metal aeroplanes and those wooden ones were a thing of the past, this company kind of decided that in order to meet the specification that was put out for this twin-engine bomber, that they had to make it in this smooth, lightweight wooden construction, no armament. So the original philosophy was if you could build an aeroplane that was faster than the fighter that was trying to shoot you down, you could just run away from them. Incredibly, in 11 months, they went from the drawing board to flying the prototype without having an order from the UK Air Ministry. And they flew the prototype and then demonstrated it to the powers that be. And the performance was so fantastic that they just couldn't, they had to kind of swallow their pride and say, right, we'll have them. They realized they had such a unique design with a lot of carrying capability. I mean, it was a bit small for what it could carry, but you know, a lot of performance, that they started to add guns and bombs and rockets and cameras and you know, radar for night fighting, and it ended up being more or less the most multi-role aeroplane that was developed in the Second World War. So this particular Mosquito is a Fighter Bomber 6, a de Havilland Fighter Bomber 6. It was built only a few months before the hostilities ended and was sent to a training unit, and then really didn't do anything else after that until the Mosquito fleet was retired. In 1948, the aeroplane was purchased by the Royal New Zealand Air Force, and it served with the RNZAF 75 Squadron for a 4-year period. An aerial survey company in California purchased 5 aeroplanes from the New Zealand Government Stores Board. Once the first aeroplane had arrived in the US and the word got out that people were privately acquiring Mosquitoes, the government put a stop to the sale of the rest of them because they were worried they were going to fall into South American hands. The company that was operating it got into financial difficulty, and the aeroplane ended up being seized by an insurance and finance company, parked at Whiteman Field near Burbank in California, where it sat for 25 years. It got spotted by a Navy A4 pilot, Jim Merizon, who saw it there and decided that he needed to rebuild a Mosquito. Eventually the bits and pieces made their way to Chino, actually. It was in 2013 in Chino that it changed hands again from Jim's storage to Rod Lewis from San Antonio, Texas. We loaded it all into a 40-foot container, sent it down to New Zealand, and the rebirth began. It's the 3rd Mosquito that we have restored in the last 7 years. You know, for a long time the Mosquito had never been something that anybody ever thought would fly again, but there's a chap in New Zealand by the name of Glenn Powell who back in the 80s decided that somebody needed to build the mould. So that was about 2005, I think. You know, caught the attention of myself and others, and right, well, we can make a flying aeroplane based on this, because it's the mould for the fuselage that's the key factor. The fuselage is split vertically down the centre, so it's made in 2 halves that sort of go together like a plastic model kit set. And the mould is a male plug that lies like sort of half a sausage with slots in it like a toast rack for the bulkheads. And then all the plywood and bulkheads are all laid over the mould, and then it's held, the wood and all the structure is held down with metal bands, steel bands with turnbuckles at either end to pull the wood down onto the structure, and it's all glued together. And then you pop the 2 halves off the mould and kind of join them together in a special fixture, and you make this big pipe. So it's made in Austria using veneer from Finland, because it's birch plywood, so it's all birch. So made in Austria, veneer from Finland to a British design, shipped to New Zealand to be built for an American. Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, so it's quite an international process. So yes, you have to have the plywood made to the original specification. Because it's the third one we've done, in a way it's got easier and easier because there's so many things that are sort of on the shelf now that help us with the job that we had to kind of dream up. But we've got more and more focused on putting all the original radio equipment and armament and all that kind of stuff into the aeroplanes. In a lot of restorations, the engine and the airframe get separated because engines are quite plentiful, and they were something that people could save and put in their basement and think, oh, one day I'll get that running. It was sort of small enough to kind of manage. So a lot of airplanes never ended up with their original engine back in them again once they've been restored. But because of the unique way that this airplane was kind of abandoned on an airfield and left untouched, the engines have stayed with the project the whole way through. The hardest part is keeping the money flowing and keeping the guy happy. So when you've got somebody like Rod Lewis who, as your customer, most of those problems go away because he appreciates that it takes a lot of time to build an airplane to this kind of standard, to do all the research and create something that's as beautiful as the airplane you see here. When we got the first Mosquito flying, we had a function together, gathering up as many Mosquito aircrew veterans as we could, and you got to appreciate how much it meant to them to see the aeroplane that they spent that terrifying few years operating. That's where you get the greatest amount of realization that you're not just building an aeroplane and making a living, you're actually having an effect on people's lives. We're not saving the world by doing it, but we're kind of honouring the people that did.